Hello, this is the Casual Author Podcast. I'm Dan Kenner, sci-fi and fantasy author. I've got a few things on my plate, as do you, and I want to help you be productive and have a positive mindset as you navigate your passion for writing while managing life's expectations. For more information about the podcast or to access my free guide, How to Have the Most Stellar Writing Sessions, head to thecasualauthor.com. Let's dive in. Hey there, it's Dan Kenner with episode number 160 of the podcast. Today is Friday, December 2025 as I record this, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about managing overwhelm when it comes to just the scope of everything in life and in authoring. I think it's a really important topic to cover because I think many of us feel overwhelmed. Some of us might feel more comfortable talking about it, others might not. I think it's just one of those areas where it's a little bit taboo, particularly when it comes to indie authoring. So, because I think there's this kind of fine line we dance on when it comes to not wanting to scare people away, but also recognizing the realistic nature of overwhelm and self-publishing and or just publishing in general. I will say that, but I can't speak to the traditional piece of it because I don't have that experience. So I'm not saying it's not there, I just don't have that experience. So, before I get into that, once again, I want to thank you for listening. Those of you that are still here, we are few, but we are strong, I'll say that. But I appreciate the support that you have given me on this podcast, and I appreciate that you come back each week to listen. So thank you for that. There were no comments on any of the episode show notes on Spotify or any of the other locations as well as YouTube. That's okay. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what you're thinking. If you appreciated the episode or if you want to hear more or less of something, let me know. I definitely want to hear from you so I can help in any way that I can. I'm just providing a different anecdotal experience based on my somewhat chaotic life. So we'll leave that there. But in terms of updates, I always like to dive into those before we get into the fun, meaty topic. Starting with the Homestead, I thought a lot about this segment and what I can share with you. The list is endless in terms of the things that I can talk about. I know you may hear things come up and disappear in terms of priority. But recently on the Homestead, it's been interesting. I always bring up the weather because that is one of the big effects on animal health and behavior and other different types of care. Recently, we've had record highs where we are located. Normally, mid-December to late December, it's very cold, and we're getting spring-like weather in the 40s. And it's a little tricky because it's started to snow and then it gets warm again and then it's been rainy. And so the wet and the soppiness is something that adds extra time to management of those animals on a daily basis. You just have to make sure that they have clean, dry places to sleep. And you can imagine when it becomes wet and sopping and warm, there's a lot of clean out that needs to happen day to day. So not a complaint, it's just a recognition of the truth. I think we're all looking a little bit forward to the cold. I know in the past I've said the cold provides its own challenges, and that's still true. But from the management perspective, cleaning out manure daily, it's so much easier when it's frozen because it's contained, it's frozen. It's just a simple pickup when it kind of melts because of the wet. I won't even get into details, but you can imagine it's fun. Fortunately, I have some amazing kids that are willing to help. Our 3 older boys, the oldest is 11, the next one is 10, and then we have an 8-year-old who really step it up. They're out carrying buckets of water. They're out helping me shovel up manure, feeding the cows and the pigs, and they're really amazing. They don't even really complain all that much, to be honest with you. They do, they're kids. I wouldn't expect them to do everything with a happy, cheery heart. So they have their moments, but for the most part, they just do it. Christmas is next week, this week rather, as this episode goes out, and they just do it. They buckle up and go out on Christmas. They know that presents won't happen until we do chores, and that's great. For the next set of 3, has nothing to do with the fact that they're girls. It's just kind of the nature of how it's broken up. They are starting to get into chores, and their personalities are just a little bit different. Our daughters tend to be more social, more homey. This isn't anything we've taught them. That's just what they enjoy doing. And they love hanging out with friends. And it's not like they're averse to work, but it's a little bit more of a challenge for them because they just want to play. They just want to have fun. They want to socialize, and that's where they feel that excitement. Our older boys are just let's just work. They're more introverts, except for the third one. well, we'll get into that. So it's just a little different. We're trying to figure out how to navigate getting them involved with outdoor chores as they get older, because the first daughter is 7 and she's starting to get old. She's been feeding the cat for a while. That's been her chore, and it hasn't been easy. She doesn't want to do it. So really, there's the line of not letting her, allowing her to speak her mind and go through those challenges, but also helping her understand the value of work. So that's fun on the chore front. I will say that one of the biggest challenges that we didn't really expect was the natural nurturing relationship between a milk cow and her baby. So I want to approach this from a perspective that doesn't make it sound so sad, because it can sound really sad, but I don't think it's as sad as it sounds. So when a cow is born, you have to decide in the moment of birth, are we going to calf share? Are we going to share our milk with this cow? Let me clarify. Are we going to share it from the udder, or are we going to bottle feed this cow? Now, the reason that's an important thing is because you have like a day to figure it out, and you have to stick with that decision, because once they start nursing off of their mom, the udder, that bond, they can do it a couple times before the bond is really formed. But if you wait a day or two, it's so formed that separating them, that calf will never stop mooing. He or she will just be depressed and sad and just miss their mom, and it's like, that's just not going to work. So you either separate them immediately, or you accept that they're going to be together forever, right? Until they stop nursing or until they wean. Now, I won't go into the challenges of each, but for the sake of the goals we have in making butter and dairy and using that dairy for our own purposes, it's called calf sharing, because the calf will take as much of the milk as they want just right away. Sometimes it's too much. Sometimes, the cow will reserve that cream for the calf. And so if you're sharing and you milk the cow and the calf is just kind of free choice on the udder, that cream will go to the calf because the mom can kind of hold it back. And my wife wants to make butter. She wants to make ice cream. There's all sorts of things. And the only way to make that happen effectively is to separate them. You milk the cow and then you feed bottles to the baby. She will let the cream out naturally in that way. And so the calf gets half the cream, you get half the cream, you kind of share it in that way through bottles. So we made the decision to not calf share with the udder, free access to the udder. It's been fine. Like, relationship wise, they're not sad. They can still touch noses through the fence. They can still hang out together. In fact, they spend time together on the other side of the fence, and it's not a problem. But the calf is still motivated to reach the milk because they can smell it. And so you have to very specifically proof your fence. Otherwise they will stick their nose through and they'll nurse. And it's happened a handful of times, right? There's points of failure in the fence that you don't even know are there until you go out to milk, and it's just like half of her udder is empty because the calf stuck her head through the fence, or the calf pushed through some wood, broke something to reach this milk. And so it's been interesting trying to protect against that. Now this is funny because we didn't have to deal with that with our first calf. He was born last year. I don't know if it's just like a personality thing, or I hate to say this, I don't mean to be rude, but is he just too dumb to figure it out? He didn't really try that hard. We had this existing fence, and we had his mom, Ginger, and he was on the other side. They were happy as can be. He didn't really try that hard to get to her. We fed him bottles, and he was satisfied, right? But this calf, she's very smart, she's very motivated, and we just keep finding points of failures in the fence because she's starting to get bigger and heavier. So that kind of leads into the reason I'm saying this is there's an unfortunate thing that can happen in cows, and it's around contracting bacterial infections. So that's what mastitis is. I won't go into all of the different ways they can get mastitis, but it's essentially there's a bacterial infection in their udder. It can cause swelling. It can really hurt them. They can get sick. They can die. So it's dangerous, right? I mentioned dealing with mastitis over the past few months. Unfortunately, we've been able to manage it. We treat her. She's okay. We treat her. She's okay. It's happened a couple times, and it's mostly gone. But there's a certain type of bacteria called staph A, which essentially is a persisting bacteria, which you can't really kill. There are ways of doing it, but it's not foolproof. So what that means is if they contract the staph A bacteria, even when they're not in milk, so you give them a break for some months or years between calves, and they come in milk again, that bacteria will potentially persist, and they'll just get mastitis again from that bacteria that never goes away. So you can try to prevent it. Your best course of action is prevention, but if they contract it, the best thing you can do is try to prevent it from spreading to the other parts of the udder. So they have 4 sections in their udder. One of her sections tested positive for staph A, which is very unfortunate. We've dried that section up, which is totally safe. So now only 3 of her other sections are in milk. The staph A one has been dried up because we can't drink that. We don't really want to feed that to the cow either, the calf. So it's just kind of dormant now. But to prevent the spread from one section to the others, you just have to be very clean. You have to wipe everything, make sure your hands are clean, make sure the gloves you're using are clean. We've been very careful, and it hasn't spread from what we believe. When that calf breaks through the fence, if she drinks off of that section and then consecutively drinks off of another section, that's a way to spread it. And so we just have to be very careful with that. If she does happen to break through the fence or push her head through the fence and touch the first section, then the second or third or fourth, then it will spread. So that was a really long explanation for the trouble that we're trying to figure out and navigate. I think we've been able to remedy it for now so far, but these are the types of things when you purchase milk animals. I would say milk animals because some goats we were milking goats for years and there were other problems, and when you have a milking animal, you just don't realize that this is what you're subscribing to. We have had moments where we transparently thought, is this worth it? Is this worth the time and the stress and the effort and all the work that goes into it? We're very happy with the food and the output and all the amazing things she can make, but the stress levels also increase. The overwhelm, which we'll talk about later, has also increased. So it's really just about weighing the pros and the cons, trying to be healthy, trying to be self-sufficient with this milk cow. She's an incredible resource. She's also sweet. Her personality is amazing. We've definitely come to love her, but taking on a milk cow is a huge undertaking that we thought we knew we were prepared for, and we were wrong. So I'll leave that there. That was just like one small aspect of what we're experiencing with the milk cow today. And yeah, just every day it's just figuring out what new thing do we experience, what do we need to account for that we hadn't planned on before. And I will say it provides a fun challenge. I'll call it fun, just for the sake of staying positive. But the pigs are stable. I won't go too much into the pigs, other than they're just getting bigger. So it's now that I'm kind of breaking up their food evenly, all 3 pigs seem to be growing at the same rate. There was one runt that was falling behind because they bullied her out. She's actually standing up for herself now, which is kind of hilarious and encouraging. She's fighting back, and it's great to see it. It's like, great, you stand up for yourself. So that's very positive. I won't go into chickens. Maybe I'll save that for next week, but it's great. All in all, the Kenner Homestead, we're prepared for winter, dealing with the spring weather, but still prepared for winter. And yeah, that's where it is. We're looking forward to some winter break in terms of outside work. Spring and summer, there's always something to do on weekends. When my colleagues ask me, what are you doing this weekend? It's just like digging a hole, right? Building a fence, calf-proofing our fence. And I was like, wow. So it's not author stuff. There's a spoiler. Speaking of author stuff, go ahead and shift over into that part of the updates. I am absolutely so relieved and thrilled to say that Dwarf Blooded is now published, mostly. I'll get into details there. So the Hidden Heritage series is the series that I've been working on for some time. The first 3 books are now completed and published, which I'm thrilled for and grateful for. It just came out on ebook this week. That was Tuesday of this week. The paperback, however, on Amazon and other locations isn't quite out. I made a new mistake that I haven't made before, and that was Amazon opened up new, I guess you could say, pre-launch options for paperback. They've always had it for ebooks. You could pre-order the book before it actually launches. They apparently started that for paperback, and I was like, great, awesome. But I accidentally set the date for December 22nd, and I missed the cutoff to try to shift it forward to the actual date I wanted to publish it, which was the 16th. And so now it's stuck on the 22nd. So by the time this podcast comes out, it will be live as a paperback as well on Amazon. And I'm still kind of noodling with some formatting issues on Ingram, but you should soon be able to get paperback everywhere. You can buy Dwarf Blooded directly from me at dankennerbooks.com or dankenner.com. It's in both of those locations. So I'll make sure to add that book link to my show notes, but it's thrilling. This is the book that was supposed to come out in September. I ran through some hurdles. There were some family emergencies, some crazy life things, and it kind of delayed me. And that's all right. It happens. I'm not complaining, but it feels like a huge relief to have it out. The cover's beautiful. The content is amazing. I will just say I'm very happy with the quality and how it turned out. And the ending is very groundbreaking in terms of the story, and it's only halfway done. So I know it made my editor's jaw drop, and even my wife and my son, who read it after, before publishing it, were like, how was that even possible? That's crazy. What's going to happen with the story, right? So it's fun. I'm very proud to say that, and these are the moments that I need to celebrate more, because sometimes I'll just publish a book and say, okay, yay, what's next? But really sitting in the moment and being grateful for publishing it is something that I'm trying to work on. So that makes book number 11 publish-wise, and now it's into the next one. So a round of edits for Fairy Blooded is the fourth book. So Fairy Blooded is from the perspective of Jared. If you know what that means, you'll have read the book, but he's the half fairy, half Samoan kid, so kind of humorous there. The combination is a little bit strange, but yeah, I think you'll really enjoy that book. There's a lot of crazy twists in that one. Now that that's out, I've been able to focus on not only Fairy Blooded, but the completion of the sixth book, which is Siren Blooded. That is the sixth of the series. I'm currently writing that one. I finished the short story that I'll be publishing on Ream next month, so that's January's short story. That one took a turn that I did not expect. It is actually a more sci-fi dystopian book than I was expecting. I was a little nervous to write it because while I love to read sci-fi, I really enjoy the aspects of it. I've always been too fearful to step into it just because I'm not a huge science person. And I know you don't have to be a scientist or really grounded in research all the time. That is part that I struggle with. I don't mind the research. I don't mind learning about new concepts, but I fear writing about them without my experience. Still, I did it anyway. So this short story will be coming out in January, and it is very interesting. So it takes place on a foreign planet in a kind of like dome-protected sanctuary city full of technology. And it is essentially like a recruitment exam for the military to fight an alien race called the Cloners. So it's kind of the story of a person who takes that exam and discovers interesting things about himself and a connection with this alien race. Yeah, I think you'll really enjoy it. I had a blast writing it. The ending definitely made me very happy. It was one of the things where you read it just like, very satisfying. So looking forward to publishing that next month. Once again, if you want to read these short stories, once a month I release them on Ream. So it's reamstories.com/Dan Kenner. Put a link in the show notes. And yeah, it's really just fun. Any feedback you have, or if you just want to enjoy a kind of a quick short story, I say quick with a grain of salt because it is around 40 to 50 pages. So it's not like short, but it's shorter than my novels, which tend to be more 350 to 400 pages. It just keeps me fresh, and I really enjoy writing them. I'm also really trying to keep a better watch on my website. I'm making some updates there. If you notice anything kludgy or strange, definitely let me know. You can either message me at dan@thecasualauthor.com or dan@dankenner.com. They both work. So that being said, that was kind of like a quick update on all those things. I want to talk about the realistic thing and challenge of overwhelm. So overwhelm happens to many people. I would argue probably to everyone to varying degrees. The effects that it has on you are different per person, so I won't speak to that. But I will point out that I think for a majority of people who experience overwhelm, it has a detracting effect on your productivity and your ability to keep up and move towards your goals and or what you're trying to accomplish. So for the sake of this discussion, I'm going to try to keep it grounded within myself and my own experience, but keep in mind that it can relate to anyone in publishing or outside of publishing. This is a pretty applicable topic to everybody. When overwhelm happens to me, it tends to hit heavy and hard and fast. And what it does to me is very challenging because it essentially turns off my brain and makes me nearly physically incapable, of functioning in all the different aspects of my life. Now, overwhelm is a constant threat to me because of just the sheer number of things that go into having 7 children, having a full-time job that I work at from home, trying to build this author business and everything with that, there are, just like community and religious responsibilities that are also there that are always on the back of my mind. And depending on the season, depending on the goals I have, which constantly shift based on where I am in life, each of those aspects will flare up in terms of task count and priority. Now, this isn't a conversation about prioritization. It's just about the overwhelm. Managing overwhelm is such an important thing to figure out for yourself, because if you don't, you become this vicious cycle of becoming overwhelmed, losing the ability to progress, and then feeling frustrated that you're not able to progress, and then becoming more overwhelmed because you're not actually managing that overwhelm from an emotional perspective. So that's why it's particularly dangerous. How can one be creative if overwhelm is there? How can one be on top of the priorities or the important things, or even creating and managing healthy relationships when overwhelm is quote unquote in the way? Being an indie author in and of itself, like, cut away all other aspects of my life. Let's assume I didn't have kids. Let's assume I didn't have a full-time job. Let's assume I was really just managing this, and that's not realistic. Obviously, I have those things. But if you look at indie authoring itself, there's a lot that goes into it. I won't bother going into everything, but there's the writing, the editing, the cover design. There's, once you get into marketing and business aspects, there's just so many tasks and details that need to be decided and considered that when you look at it on a whole, it's difficult to know where to start, and or that overwhelm can consume you, and then you don't make progress because it's just the task paralysis, the whole overwhelm aspect takes over. Now, when it comes to managing the overwhelm within the sphere of indie authoring, or we can call it traditionally authoring as well, traditional publishing, maybe I should clarify. Yeah, that overwhelm needs to be considered and broken through by you taking a step back and reviewing what your goals actually are, and whether some of these tasks are actually important or nice to haves. So let me give you what I mean by that. Recently, it really came to a head for me that overwhelm hit me hard like a boulder when I had an amazing conversation with a buddy of mine who is a full-time indie author. I won't name him. He's amazing, though. He took the time to meet with me and really was like, look, this is what worked for me. This is how I managed to get off my feet. This is off my feet, maybe isn't the right saying. Get on my feet, rather, with respect to indie authoring. Here are the steps I took. Pretty much it was a very amazing and complicated framework of leveraging social media and being consistent on social media. And it really helped him take off. And he's doing very, very well. Now, if you've listened to my podcast for some time, you'll know that social media and Dan Kenner are not friends. It has nothing to do with social media and everything to do with Dan Kenner. The ability to really connect on social media. And part of it could be ADHD, part of it could just be preferential. But this story about overwhelm came to a head, as I mentioned, when having that conversation, there was that slight influx of, okay, this worked for him, it can work for me. All I need to do is be more disciplined, create content, set aside time for X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, E, all of the things. Sounds simple, right? Except it was just a lot. The overwhelm consumed me relatively quickly. What I was forced to do is take a step back and say, okay, hang on just a second. What are my goals as an author? There is the grand goal of becoming a full-time author, but there's also the goal of making connections and really being able to support and help other people who are in the same spot as me from a publishing perspective, whether they're in the beginning or in the throng of it like myself. I want to be able to have meaningful, deep conversations and relationships with people. Great. Awesome. And that's a goal. Another goal of mine is to establish a fan base who cares about me and cares about the works, the things that I'm writing. And okay, great. Those are some of my goals. Now, when I take those goals during this overwhelm period and really apply it to the scheme of tasks, it actually starts to break through some of the ones that don't match those goals. Right? For example, the having deep, meaningful conversations with people. Social media is not a platform for that. Short form content, posting on Instagram, or on Facebook, TikTok, those are the words I'm looking for. Those are not deep, grounded conversations generally. Can it be? Potentially. But for me, that is a more shallow, big, broad, wide net approach to publishing. And it doesn't necessarily align with that goal of helping other authors in the same spot and or connecting with people who care about me or interested in me and my life and my writing. And so it's because it didn't align with my goals, it doesn't align with my true preferences, I was able to shave off those tasks and say, you know what? I'm going to set those aside. And there's still the temptation to pick them up because it may work for someone else. I'm using quotations if you can't see. Or to do it just because I know it's available and free. But that's when it starts to tip back into the overwhelm. So really, the recommendation is take a step back and actually review, what are you hoping to accomplish? What is your goal with authoring? What are you hoping to accomplish? If that's simply, I just want to finish my book. My goal is to finish my book this year. Personally, I think that actually makes it easier, right? Because social media isn't part of that. I'm just using social media as an experiment or as an example. Say, does listening to podcasts, does reading books around craft, does that help you with finishing your book? It may or may not, right? I can't speak to it. But you have to realistically say, if I'm reading a book a week to learn about craft, am I actually making progress towards finishing my book this year? Probably not. You're spending more time reading than you are writing. Right? If your goal is to make $100 a month on your business by the end of the year, okay, well, then you have to review that goal. I'm trying to make a set amount of money, which means I need to find people to purchase my books and to come into this. I'm going to have to employ a lot of marketing methods. So when you look at that, you look at your overwhelmed set of tasks and say, writing right now is not leading me towards this goal of making $100 a month. So I'm going to slide down on my writing time. I'm going to keep writing, but not as much. I'm going to spend more time focused on ads and focused on social media and focused on these other aspects that help me reach that goal. Really targeting what that goal is allows you to kind of deal with that overwhelm, because you can really say, okay, it's actually not too overwhelming, because when I isolate what my goal is and what tasks actually relate to that goal, suddenly it doesn't seem so bad, right? There's the management of all of those things. So that's one aspect of it. Remember your goal, remember what actually directly ties to that, and really consider what does not, and set those things aside. It doesn't mean you have to do them ever. It just means for your current goal, those don't align with it. So you can be more targeted on your focus of the things you're wanting to accomplish. That's one. Two, in dealing with overwhelm, and this is the piece that's going to depend largely on you. The human, I'm not a scientist. Let me start with this. You may hear this and be like, Dan, you're crazy. But the human brain has the capacity to process emotions and or overwhelm and or intense experiences differently depending on the person. But each person's brain has different concessions or activities that it can employ to cope with whatever those emotions are. Now, that's a really nebulous thing that I said there, but it's an important thing to highlight, that sometimes people feel like if I'm overwhelmed, if I have task paralysis, or if I just feel stressed in general, I can just push through. I'll just push through. That might work for some people. Sometimes working hard is what your brain needs to deal with that overwhelm. But sometimes it's not. And that's the piece I want to be sensitive of. We need to be really realistic with ourselves and say, when do I feel my happiest? When do I feel most relaxed? When do I feel confident and or capable of managing life? What am I doing? It might be gaming. It might be reading. It might be going for a walk outside. It might be watching movies. It could be calling your friend up and just having a chat. It might be calling a family member. It might be traveling, right? I don't know. It could be anything for anyone. But those are the things that you could call it filling up your well. Rest and relaxation. This is where you need to be able to understand the trade-off between working hard and giving your brain the rest and recuperation it needs to keep moving forward. Now, I will go ahead and say that I struggle with this. Sometimes it's self-inflicted challenges because of how rigid my schedule is, from work to the farm life to authoring to every other responsibility, religious, be it community. I give myself the sense that there isn't time to do the things that make me feel satisfied. And so the overwhelm starts to take over, and it actually inhibits my ability to be productive or get anything done. So I'll use this as an example. When I get into writing, let's say I have a goal of writing 2,000 words a day, right? I don't do that anymore, to clarify. I don't do word counts per day goals anymore. But let's say I did. And there was a time when I did. And for 2 weeks, it was going great. 2K words a day. I carved out time, got up early, stayed up late, took breaks here and there throughout the day for 10 minutes at a time, really stuck to that 2,000 word goal per day. Then work started getting overwhelming. I got a new manager. Kids got sick. Life really hit me hard. And that 2,000 word goal dipped, and the overwhelm hit me. And then the next session I sat down to write 2,000 words, I stared at my computer because I couldn't function. Everything swimming in my brain was taking over, right? At that point, it's not about being true to your schedule. It's not about sitting down and just making it happen. No matter what I did, that overwhelm wasn't going to let me write. It wasn't going to let me do anything productive. And I couldn't just push through. Right? That's when it comes to creativity, when it comes to solutioning, when it comes to creating up for solutions to problems. In an overwhelmed state, it's not going to happen, or it won't happen well. Blunders happen, mistakes happen. So at that point, you have to be honest and say, well, since it's not happening, and I can't push through this, do I keep pushing through it? Or do I hit pause on it and do the thing that I know will help me recharge, whatever that thing is? I listed a whole bunch of options. When I feel my soul at peace, when I feel my mind relaxed, when I feel like life isn't taking me over and controlling me, that's when it's okay to take a step back and do that thing instead. There's a combative ideology in our brain that says, I'm not being productive if I'm doing something fun, or I'm not making progress if I am doing this instead of completing my checklist. But at the end of the day, if you're overwhelmed, you're not going to be doing it anyway. So accepting that and doing the fun thing instead, that's probably going to be the best bet to unravel that overwhelm, to really recuperate and get back into a space where you can write. Now, that did happen to me recently. The 2,000 word a day wasn't necessarily the true example. What it really was, I found myself sitting down to write, and I struggled. I tried to force my way through it. I would write, and I'd maybe get a couple hundred words down, and you might think, hey, that's actually really good. But when you go back and read those 200 words, it's just like, ooh, those weren't good. They are. The editing that will be required for those 200 words is insane. Now, I'm glad I got them down because at least I can edit them. But in those instances, I realized I should have instead taken the time to recharge my brain, reaffix my goals in my perspective, and allow myself that breathing room to get back into it, whether that's a week, whether that's a day, whether that's a month. I don't know what it looks like. But once I realized the problem, I dealt with it by doing those things which give me satisfaction, which refill my well, reading certain books. Not books assigned to me, books that I'm actually interested in, consuming podcasts, really encouraging podcasts, having open conversations with other authors, having frank conversations with other business partners and or friends, and really coming to the realization that, these relationships, this is why I'm here, telling a good story and just providing that excitement to a reader. That's what I really care about. Unraveling that overwhelm for, a week and being okay with not making progress during that week. By the time I came back to it and sat down, the overwhelm might have still been there a little bit, but I was able to capture that creativity again, that wonder, that thrill of pantsing, of discovery writing and not knowing where the story is going to take me. That's the feeling I want to instill in readers. So if I can't feel that while I'm writing, then I need to deal with it first before I write. So long story short, the two aspects that come to mind for dealing with overwhelm is make sure to address it from a goal perspective, look at those goals. And then the second piece is take the time for yourself to do the things that unravel that overwhelm, that open up your brain, your creativity, and balance those. Always keep a watch on yourself. If you can push through, do it. But be understanding of yourself, and if you just can't push through, you probably need to take a break. So that's that. I'll leave that there. If you have any insights, if you have thoughts, if you want to add to this conversation, please comment on the show notes on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you're listening. Would love to bring those up and read those and share what you've experienced or what other tips you have. If you'd like to join me to talk about overwhelm, to talk about any other productivity tips with respect to authoring, managing an author business and having a dream, despite life, then join me. You can there's a pitch form at thecasualauthor.com. Fill it out or email me at dan@thecasualauthor.com. Love to hear from you. I appreciate you listening today, and thank you again. Look forward to, actually, I'll say this. I probably will not be having a podcast episode next Monday from the release of this podcast just because of the holidays. There's Christmas, and then there's New Year's, and there's all sorts of things going on. So I'm taking a brief hiatus, but I will be back the following week, and we'll love to hear from you. Thank you again for listening. I'll talk to you later.